Frankenstein by Mary Shelley was a revolutionary work of literary art during the Gothic revival era of the 19th century. As well as studying the novel itself, it's also very important to understand the surrounding factors of its writing. Frankenstein defines the genre that we now know as Gothic horror. The Gothic horror genre is a combination of horror, fiction, and romanticism that embodies much of the literature of the 19th century, as well as many of the stories and films that we now know and love today. In order to fully understand and appreciate the genre, it's very important to be educated about the historical, literary, and psychological background behind it. I interviewed with author and English teacher Miss Howard and psychology and sociology teacher Miss Bumgarner to investigate the Gothic horror genre in history and also in the present.
The purpose of the Gothic horror genre, that's really funny. We were just talking about that in AP Literature class today. We're reading Heart of Darkness, and I was positing, based on some of my reading that I did on QuestiaSchool.com, there's your commercial, that Heart of Darkness could be viewed as a Gothic novel because it's about someone, the main character Marlowe, goes into Central Africa, and essentially what he's doing is confronting the other. He's seeing people and situations in a life that's different from what he's used to, and that's essentially the basis of the Gothic novel. For example, one of the criticisms of Heart of Darkness is that Marlowe doesn't see the people of the Congo as human. He makes a couple of statements about like they're not human, and that's really taken to the next step. That's really what Gothic is about. The idea of the other being so different and so alien from you that you feel like they are actually not the same as you. And so in Gothic it becomes literal, so sometimes there's literal monsters. It's the idea that even though the monsters are sometimes something that, you know, they can be made into really silly parts of movies, you know, like if you look at like horror movies, you've got like Frankenstein's monster, it's really silly, but those are actually representations or projections of something that's real, like a real part of the human experience. Like for example, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is one of my favorite TV shows, is about something that's not realistic. It's about this high school that's on a hellmouth, and there's all these demons and vampires and creatures that crawl out of the hellmouth. But Joss Whedon, the person who created the show, said it's not about that. It's because it's really about the fact that high school is like hell, because you're dealing with so many emotions and things are raging out of control, and you have to learn to face all those fears and conquer all those, you know, those new like experiences. And so it's allegorical. Well, Gothic, I would say, is a subgenre of Romanticism. I mean, Romanticism broadly is more about simply the idea of emotion over reason, and Gothic takes that and sort of is a subset, and you're looking at certainly kind of confronting those emotions, like I said, with the idea of metaphorical monsters, but Romanticism broadly is often not about that. A lot of times they believe that the path to truth is through like communion with nature and things that are realistic. So I would say like the broad umbrella is Romanticism, and then sort of a smaller chunk underneath would be Gothic. Well, I think obviously the most clear-cut lesson, if there is meant to be like a moral to the story, is that humans are not God, and that science needs to be tempered with, you know, just because we can do a thing doesn't mean we should do a thing. And so that's part of why I think that book has a very strong message today, because we can do even more. I mean, it's sort of a silly idea, the idea of creating a creature, creating life using science in the 19th century, but today we just about can, because science has advanced so much. But it becomes about, okay, we can, should we?
I think that the unexpected is what entices the public to horror. I think that it's a way for us to explore reactions and situations that we wouldn't normally be in. So I think that it's that unknown and that not knowing what, and it gets exciting for us, and we don't know, but we know we'll never be in that situation. Yeah. So it's still safe. So it's a safe way of like exploring that situation. So The amygdala is the part of the brain that responds, part of the limbic system is the part of the brain that responds to fear. It does fear responses and also does pleasure as well. The amygdala helps our reactions, like our fight or flight, so it shows us threats, and it definitely is activated when we watch horror movies or read about horrific things. In my opinion, I was thinking firstly about the biological and evolutionary theories of psychology, in that our brains, as they evolved, were looking for the next threat. And our fear response says, I'm scared, I need to do something about this. So our brains are being warned about threats. So whether we're like a caveman and there's a woolly mammoth following us, or we're being chased by a serial killer, it's basically the same thing. So it's our brain sort of responding to that threat and figuring out how to respond to it. So that's what I think.
As you can see, the Gothic horror genre is the ultimate source of art forms in the 19th century, as well as the various art forms of today. The literary and psychological elements of this genre create insight for the viewer about the history behind it, as well as how much the genre has evolved today. So the next time you watch a horror film or read a Gothic novel, be sure to look out for these elements to fully understand the work's purpose.